is a PG podcast, but then Devin just kept on dropping shits and fucks, and
I'm just trying to figure out what's in her mouth.
I just want to see him interview Francesco Accoli.
No, he's a good human being, is what he would say about himself, I'm sure.
Who's hosting this thing?
Take charge, Kevin, would you? Jesus.
First time we ever met those guys. That was the major drunken pub argument.
I think you guys are the worst.
I'm gonna have to probably watch some Canucks hockey, unfortunately.
Just making friends left, right, and center, and probably some enemies as well.
Tell him to shut up. He needs to hear that every once in a while.
Off to a good start.
All right. We are live.
It's okay to talk when it goes live.
For the second time today, we are live on the Hockey Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at podcast_hockey, Facebook.com, we are live, YouTube.com, the Hockey Podcast, Facebook.com, the Hockey Podcast. The audio will be up shortly after that, where you can subscribe to our podcast there as well. And subscribe on YouTube. We are currently, in terms of YouTube, by the way, we are at the Arturi Letkinen amount of now subscribers. So growing slowly but surely. Grateful for all of you. We've got lots to get into. We are here to first part of this. We're going to recap the Toronto Maple Leafs defeating the Calgary Flames 2-1 in overtime. What does that mean for both teams? And then a little later on at about 7:45 Pacific time, because there is no mountain time zone. Anyway, we'll explain that a little bit.
Only according to Ryan Kessler.
Yes. We'll have Bik Nizzar and Jamie Dodd from Canucks Central joining us to unpack what is going on with the Canucks, which is lots. So, Sean, hello. Showing up and winning, are you?
Someone has to. The Canucks aren't.
Fair. If it was a Canucks show up and blow the lead, is that what you would have for the Canucks shirt?
God. Yeah, I guess so. Oh, that's just disgusting.
Fair. Devin, your mixed bag came with I think you're always happy with the 3 points, because then you're, with these 3-point things, you're happy, I guess. But
yeah, it was both games were pretty fun to watch. Big State Dave is back, and as of right now he is, at least. We'll see if that consistency, if he has the consistency to keep that going. But yeah, a 3-point game is always nice. But at the same time, there's one team that needs more points than needs the points more than the other, and that's Calgary Flames. And it's bittersweet for me, because I mean, obviously Leafs won, but Flames needed that extra point for sure to stay in this playoff race. So it was bittersweet.
Yeah. Yes. Bittersweet. That's a good way to describe this game. But first, I think let's address the 4th place team in the North Division, which the Flames, quite frankly, lost a point again. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the Montreal Canadiens fired Claude Julien and Kirk Muller. They have brought in, I keep wanting to call him David Desharnais. That's not his name. Dominic Duchamps, Alex Burrows are the new coaching staff. Hot Take Hockey, who is already on the chat with us here, has pointed out that he asked us who would get fired first, and we were wrong. It was Claude Julien first. We'll start with Devin. Your thoughts? Are you surprised? Is this a good move? Is this the panic button being switched? What are your thoughts here?
My thoughts are that I think that they wanted to potentially fire him in the offseason, and maybe even before the offseason of this past year. Once COVID hit, I think that they were on hold to kind of the Canadians were on hold to kind of see how the rest of the season was going to pan out. But after COVID, they were the very last team to get into the quote unquote playoffs, or to try and get into the playoffs with the play-in series in the bubble. And they did well, obviously. And then Claude Julien had had his health issues, and so I think that kind of pushed it back a little bit. And I think they were off to a hot start. So how could Bergevin fire Julian with the way that his team was playing? And now that they are sliding a little bit, the panic button was pushed. But I think that this goes back about a year to year and a half, personally.
What did I call him? Did I call him? His name is Dominique Ducharme. I hope I called him right. I've been known to butcher names before, so I just want to make sure.
I've heard everyone call him Dominic Ducharme.
Dominic. Okay, that's what I hope I called him. Sean, what were your thoughts?
Oh, it's a total panic move. The Habs, yeah, they haven't played great in the past little bit, but they were still they didn't get the results the past little bit. But they were still playing good, and for a while, and they were still controlling play 5-on-5 for the most part. And then we all looked at Kirk Muller as the heir apparent, but we completely overlooked Ducharme, especially because of the extra criteria you need to be the head coach of the Montreal Canadiens. You need to be French speaking and ideally of Quebecois descent. So I honestly think it's a complete panic move. I didn't think there was a need to fire Claude Julien, but we'll see what happens. Because I don't like the Habs could go on a run here, and this could be a move that is looked back on same as the Penguins replacing their head coach with Mike Sullivan and going on to win the Stanley Cup, so as well as St. Louis with Craig Berube. So there's potential there. I think the Habs do have the potential to do something in this wacky season. So we'll see what happens. I still think it's a panic move, but we'll see. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder where this I wonder what the thinking is. I mean, you're obviously going to stick with these guys. We talked to Joel Gaudette and I recapped this afternoon. If you missed that, go on our Facebook page or YouTube page and listen to that. But it's a lot of very interesting things going on there. I mean, I think you end up keeping these guys for the season, but I also wonder if it's getting a head start on trying to see if you can get one of the big names, the Boudreaux, the Gallants, I'm not the who shall not be named. And I'm just going to point this out. Travis Green, Rod Brindamore, John Tortorella, Rick Tocchet, 4 coaches that do not have a contract next year.
Yeah, but do they all have that extra criteria?
Look, Rod Brindamore can just walk around Montreal with his shirt off, and that is probably going to be the same as French for a lot of them. They will be fine with that. I'm pretty convinced. Exactly. The French comes out. Ooh la la. Oui, oui.
I like the way you're thinking there, Kev, but if this was any other market, you'd be onto something. But this is Montreal. And every head coach that they have hired, save for I think Randy Cunnyworth, has been a fluent French-speaking coach who basically has been of Quebecois descent. So unfortunately, I do think that this is not unfortunately. I think this is what they're looking at for the foreseeable future. Yes, it's the interim. Ducharme's got the interim tag, but if Montreal plays well, makes the playoffs and wins a round or two, he's going to keep that job. Who else is out there that they can bring in? Michel Therrien? They've done that. Alain Vigneault?
Well, there is someone they can bring in. There is someone they can bring in. The question is, do you want to take the risk? On both ends, there's a lot of risk.
Who are you talking about there, Kev?
Patrick Waugh.
I'm
not saying I am asking a question. I'm not saying it's a good idea.
I like the thought process. I think that's
That'd be entertaining.
Very, yeah.
And then we'd have Chris with the popcorn just pretty much stay. But
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. Is it probable? Yeah. Is it going to happen? No, I don't think so. I don't know who else is out there off the top of my head, being from Quebec, but yeah, you got to within that market. You have to make sure that they can speak French, and can understand it as well. So yeah, I'd say that who they have now is who they're going to go with going forward here, especially if they go on a run. It buys them a bit of time too, and it does buy Bergevin a bit of time, because I know that we've talked about it on the podcast here before that he could be on the hot seat eventually, especially if the prime of Carey Price is gone. Shea Weber, he's aging. Gallagher is not getting any younger either, so they do have a good young core coming up, but yeah, it buys Bergevin a bit of time.
And I think one thing that we need to talk about, and yes, you'll probably call Canucks bias on this, but the development of Alex Burrows as an assistant coach too. There's a reason they're bringing him up from Laval, from the AHL. There's a reason that they're doing that, and it's as a former Canuck, as he's a former Canuck, I'm really enjoying watching him grow as a coach. And there's a lot of people talking big things for Alex Burrows in the coaching ranks, and it'll be interesting to see what goes forwards, especially now that Alex Burrows is coaching Corey Perry.
Oh, that'll be fun. That's also be fun. That'll be Chris popcorn stuff. And there is that parallel there too with Vancouver, not only being an ex-Canuck, but I'll save that question when we talk to Bik and Jamie about I'm not saying Alex Burrows could be the next coach of the Vancouver Canucks, but that's certainly
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. That's Lil Wongo for GM bullshit.
No,
it could happen though. That's the thing, Sean. It could happen. And yes, is it reach? Absolutely. But the thing you got to think about is that ex-players that have worked their asses off and have had to make their game so flawless in every single part of the game to get to where they were. And Alex Burrows is a pure testament to that, because he worked his ass off and he had his defensive game down. He had the neutral zone game down. And yeah, once you figure out those two, the offense usually comes if you're talented enough and you work hard enough to do that. So those type of players, when they transition and if they want to be in coaching realms, then I feel like they do a really good job. And it's, when you have the Wayne Gretzky's of the world trying to be head coaches, that's a lot harder for them because it was just so pure talent for them. But I wouldn't put it out of the possibility that he would become a head coach one day, Alex Burrows. But there's only 31 and soon to be 32 head coaching jobs. He needs to prove himself, but if he does, good on him.
That's where I'm at. He needs to prove himself. That idea is a couple seasons down.
Yeah, I'm not saying head. Yeah, I mean it's certainly something you can think about, maybe to bring in a staff capacity of some way, for sure. Wouldn't hurt, but we'll see where that is. If you have comments on that, let us know. We'll address that. But let's get to the Leafs and the Flames. The Flames on Monday, after a 3-game losing streak, was coming in to face the on fire, about to score 50 goals in 56 games, Austin Matthews and the Toronto Maple Leafs. And lo and behold, we learn that Jacob Markstrom, their best player, is day-to-day with an upper body injury. And lo and behold, Big Save Dave appeared and shut out the Leafs 1-0. And for most of this game, Big Save Dave was there again until the final minute. The Flames score. Andre Mangiapane scores with 3 minutes and 20 seconds to go. Elias Lindholm and Mangiapane go down. Lindholm shoots, hits the post, and crashing the net are the Leafs. And William Nylander, who made a terrible defensive play on the Mangiapane goal, redeems himself, ties the game, and then wins it in overtime. So I guess from the Leafs perspective, Devin, well, because we usually like to start from the winners here. How are you coming away with this 2-game series? You got 2 out of a possible 4 points. You have lots of injuries here, including Frederik Andersen, Joe Thornton, Jake Muzzin,
Hyman for the first game.
Matthews has got 1 point. Marner got nothing, I don't think. Where are you at? What if you're a Leaf fan? What advice do you have for Leaf fans now?
You got to hope that the power play comes back to life. God, when you are the number 1 power play and you give up that many chances and don't capitalize on them, it is a bit concerning. You gotta think that they are able to. They're too talented to not get back to where they were, or at least score on 1 or 2 of those power plays. So overall, I felt like their game was well. They played pretty decent. It was a little sloppy here and there, but just that the special team units need to be better. And God, I do not like this drop pass that's been that came into the league 5 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe even longer. But it doesn't seem like it's working. At least to penetrate the zone and to gain the offensive zone to set up your power play. I can't stand it. It doesn't seem to be working anymore. And coaches are usually they try and manipulate their play to make sure that those obvious plays that everybody seems to be doing now is stopped. And it seems that way that the PK coaches have found a way to stop that drop pass and to stop the speed getting in the neutral zone with that drop pass. So I would love to see them try something different and gain the zone just with handling the puck straight up the ice, or if there's a pass there, pass it in. I can't stand that shit. So
there's 30 other teams who have the same fan bases who are screaming the same thing.
Oh God.
Because that drop pass is, like you said, it's in the league, it's everywhere. I think it still can work. But you need to execute it properly, and 99% of the time, all the teams aren't executing it properly. They're waiting way too. They're dropping the puck to someone who is like you're dropping the puck at the red line potentially for a guy who's at the dots of their defensive zone. If you're going to do that, you need to be dropping that puck to someone who's going on their horse, at top speed, and who is right behind you. Because as soon as you make that drop pass, and you have to wait for the player to come up and get that puck, everyone else, all 4 other players on the ice, skaters on the ice, now have to stop at the opposing blue line. And then as soon as that guy comes in, either you've lost your depth. Because the whole point of that is to create depth and to create speed entering the zone. So
when you start doing that all the time, then it becomes monotonous. Like the creativity is gone within the power play, and I just feel like that they rely on that too much. If they have more plays in their arsenal, then the players can get more creative, and it's not so much just like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do, defenseman, okay, come up the puck, drop it, okay, great. And your best puck handling skater tries to skate it in. It just drives me nuts. So for the Leafs goal, they really need to find a way to score on the power play again. Once they do that, then they'll be fine, because that's been their whole MO. Once they've had such high-end talent, is that, you know what, okay, take all the penalties you want, but we'll capitalize on the power play, and that hasn't happened. And you are going to go through lulls through the season of power plays, of games you're not playing well. So I have no doubt in my mind that they'll bounce back. Just a matter of when, really.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I mean, hearing of Zach Hyman, I just was reading some of the quotes here from Zach Hyman on what William Nylander means. He's such a big part of our hockey team and our locker room with his personality, his drive to be a great player. So it's awesome to see him get 2 big ones. And it was very uplifting for him. I mean, he's been a guy, Nylander too, just to talk about him quickly, who's been much maligned in Toronto since the Steve Simmons article came out.
That was last week, right?
Yeah. So, and I mean, Tavares, that's an interesting case too. You played him with Matthews and Marner in the first game, not as much here in the second game, but you did a lot of line juggling. The Leafs did a lot of line juggling. I guess for me, my concern would be the secondary scoring. I think that there's a lot of talent in Leafland. I mean, Ilya Mikheyev that needs like some sort of luck, for the love of God. I mean, for sure. But that secondary scoring, and then if you are able to either contain Matthews and Marner in some way, shape, or form, I think you do have a chance to beat the Leafs. And the other thing too with the Leafs, and I'm not trying to, there's going to be some people are going to be a little frustrated when I say this. I mean, I don't know if this pace that they are on right now is sustainable. I think that they're due for a slide. Every other team has had some sort of slide and have had the streaks, and the Leafs haven't had that quite yet. So I do think that that's due as well.
Yeah, the slide is like the ups and downs are going to happen. The downs are coming. Yeah, like you said, Kev, especially in the North Division, you've seen the ups and downs from the Flames, Flames, Canucks, Oilers, Winnipeg. There's this coming, right? And from being a Flames fan or a Leafs fan, from being a Leafs fan, I really think, and I'm hoping that it happens sooner than later. You don't want that slide to happen before the playoffs, because then your confidence is shot. You want to be amping up and making sure that everybody is ready and is firing, cliche, firing on all cylinders once playoff time comes and right before the playoffs. So I believe that they will, but that slide is going to come eventually, and who knows? Maybe this slide is right now, because you do have the Tampa Bays of the world that have dominated an entire season, but haven't really until last year transferred it to the playoffs. So that could be the Leafs this year. Who knows?
Sean, did you have any thoughts on that?
I was just looking at some of the stats, and yeah, I think they are due for a little bit of a slide, or just coming back to the pack a bit. I think they are going to be the team that stays out in front and leads this North Division throughout the season. But I think they are due for a little bit of coming back to the pack here. I think this might be the start of it if they can't figure out how to to start scoring again, because they're not a team that's going to be able to win those 2-1 games at this point. They thrive when they can score, and if they're not scoring, and they've scored 2 goals in the past 2 games and went to overtime, so we'll see. I think it is something to watch with the Leafs, because as Kevin, you said, every other team's had a slider. If you're Ottawa and Vancouver, you've been sliding all year basically, and you are going to have ups and downs throughout the season, and if they can, how quickly they can nip this in the butt will be a true testament as to how solid a group that this Leafs team is.
Yeah, and to your secondary scoring, Kev, they're just too talented. That second line is just too talented to stay quiet for much longer, really, especially 5-on-5. I feel like Mikheyev, if he keeps on playing the way he's playing, his puck luck will go the right way. He's had multiple chances. He just hasn't buried it. But, getting those chances is a real good sign that things are going the right way for him. And it's been a while. It's been almost about a year since he's really been able to show why he is so good. Beginning of last year, I remember he was phenomenal. He worked hard, big body, always skating, and it was paying off. Then he got injured, and since that injury, he has been himself. So, if he keeps on doing the right things, then keep on playing the way that he's playing right now, then the goals will come. Right, the process that he's doing right now is the right way to go. And I think that also Alex Kerfoot has shown a little bit of spark here as well within the past couple of games too. So that is promising.
Yeah, they're mixing him up with they put him up sometimes on the second line and then move him back or move him around a bit. So that helps as well. I think what's going to be it will be interesting with the Oilers coming in with the next 2-3 games against the Oilers. The one thing that the Oilers have shown lately, and yes, the Flames got McDavided on Saturday, but they are getting goals from Gaetan Haas, Dominic Cahoon, the non-McDavid Draisaitl guys are starting to score, and I do think that's where if I'm the Leafs, I'm really interested in that because the Oilers could make this a race if they take 2 or 3 here. If they win this series, they close the gap a little bit on the North Division, and they're the hottest team right now. So, as that pained me to say, that hurt right here, but it's true, right?
Yeah, they definitely are surging right now, and Josh Archibald is up there too with the secondary and tertiary scoring. They definitely are a threat to the Leafs, and these next 2 to 3 games are going to really, kind of show that, and it could be the defining factor when it really comes down to who's going to get into playoffs or slotting or seeding in the playoffs. Carl
the cat has joined us.
Yes, he has. Fucking cat. I believe that if the Leafs are going to do well, they need Anderson back. They need Jake Muzzin back. Jake Muzzin not being in the lineup is massive because him and Hall have been the best tandem in my opinion in the North Division. They've done very, very well up there with Hanifin and Tanev. Maybe not so much as of right now, but Hanifin and Tanev at the beginning of the season. So if they're going to be successful, they need those two back. Either that or have Jack Campbell come back into the mix. They are. Hutchinson. He's a good Band-Aid if he's playing well, but it's a Band-Aid and it'll bleed through eventually.
Yeah. Let's flip to the Flames. First of all, let's applaud David Rittich. These last 2 games, he got his first win in almost a year. He's been through a lot personally, professionally. He has seen Talbot. He's seen Markstrom take that number 1 position. Give him credit. He's been outstanding these last 2 games. It's been Big Save Dave, and it's been a quieter Big Save Dave. Although Monday was a bit of a couple of adventures. Big Save Dave came back. We saw the revival of him.
He is back, and I'm happy to see it. The Flames need it. If you're looking at it from the Flames red rosy glasses, then yeah, it's fantastic to have him back, and it's good to have a goalie back there that is willing and able to steal them some games. But as far as the big picture goes, the Flames need to be playing better. They have little spurts here and there of goodness, but the majority of their game is just shit. And Rittich, he was there the past 2 games, which is phenomenal. I'm happy for him. I think that Markstrom's calmness and poise have really rubbed off on him. And hopefully that he can sustain that level-headedness going forward. And you still want to have a bit of swagger. I love that about him, but not too much. There's a lot of people who didn't like the stick flip that happened against Edmonton last year. I fucking loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Just as long as he's able to, if he does that, he's able to come back and stop the puck and have that poise in the net that supposedly Markstrom is rubbing off on him. So I don't want him to change, but yeah, he definitely made massive saves tonight, especially. He had Matthews coming in on a breakaway, a partial breakaway, saved that pretty well. The biggest and best one, I think, was against John Tavares from my pass across the ice. He was going one way, Tavares was going the other. He was able to get his edge on the one side to push back towards where Tavares was going and be able to make that big save. And then that of course, Mikheyev saves. He was just well positioned there coming across, and Mikheyev, I think he didn't get all of it and where he wanted to put it. But, that's why he has his nickname is Big Save Dave. And I think not to like shit on him or anything like that, but that Nylander shot, it was a great shot. But once again, it is a shot from underneath the hash marks that he should have, going far side nonetheless on his glove side. So I feel like everybody knows his weakness, which is his glove side. That's no secret, I don't think. But he, those are the ones that he normally gives up is the ones that are lower percentage. And then once he's in the spotlight of a breakaway or one timer, he's right there. So that's kind of the knock on him, but not to knock on him too much because obviously he had a great night tonight.
To be fair, if we are going to criticize Rittich for that, then I do think we need to give some criticism for Elias Lindholm not burying an empty net goal.
100%. God, you have to have that fucking goal. If that happens, it's solidified. Calgary wins in regulation. Yep. And call that puck luck, call that, the hockey gods bless the post as time traveling Hendricks has commented in on our comments there. So it's really too bad. At least they got 1 point, being a Flames fan, you got to be happy about that. But still a bit of a sour note right there, especially with that last goal in OT. Rittich has to have those ones. He really does.
I disagree. I think that was an absolutely amazing shot from Nylander. I think that's a shot that is stopped maybe 2 out of 10 times. I think that's just.
Oh my God,
that's a fantastic shot.
It's a great shot.
Yeah. That's a shot that gets scored on in overtimes all the time. I understand where you're coming from, but I think you just have to give it a hat tip to and a stick tap to Nylander on that one. He comes back and scores 2 goals after that blown assignment in front of the net on the Mangiapane goal. Like, why did he stop so short on that? But he comes back, gets an absolute greasy goal to tie it up, and then an absolutely just snipe top cheddar to win it. I think you have to give Nylander credit on that one. Please,
I gave him credit for sure, but on that angle, man, the goalie needs
that's
to
how
have
good
those
of a shot.
ones.
That's how good a shot that was.
Go watch it again.
I just did actually while you were talking.
Yeah,
actually, I'll have it here for you. Here, look
Beautiful.
at this. Look at this. Look at that here. I'm just gonna. Oh, not that. Oh, there we go. Sorry, there.
What's going on here, Kevin?
Technical difficulties. Please stand by. There we go. Full screen. There we go. And then there we go. There we go. Here it is. Moving in.
Yeah, that's just a good shot.
He's got to fucking have that, man. He's got to like he's right on the bottom of the fucking circle, right on the circle. Goalies need to have that one. And yes, it's a fantastic shot. I'm not giving anything away from Nylander, but especially when it really matters. Look how far down he is on that. Like, I don't know. I'm giving Nylander credit, but at the same time, goalies. I truly believe goalies need to have that.
But for positive for Riddick, the Flames need Riddick to play like this. They cannot run Markstrom into the ground like they did at the beginning of the season. There's a reason he's injured, and that's because they ran him into the ground. The Canucks did it multiple times over the past 2 seasons, and the Flames need to learn from that. If Riddick can start playing like that so that Jeff Ward and the coaching staff have the comfortability to actually start Riddick more often, that's a great sign for the Flames.
It's a terrible sign for the Flames, actually. I agree with you. You have to have a hot goalie. But if you're playing this fucking bad as a team in front of your goalie, that's not sustainable. You're relying on your goalie to save every single game. That can't happen. That cannot happen if you want to go far into the playoffs and if you want to be a good fucking team. Period.
I was talking about the goaltenders, not the players in front of them.
No, but as a whole though, right? That is that's the glaring difference right there. Is that yes, okay, you have a great goalie, awesome, he can save you games, great. Kiprusoff all over again, great. But I'm personally, I'm happy for the goalies, but I'm sick and tired of having the same bullshit effort and the glaring defensive miscues. Where the goalie has to have an amazing save on a 2-on-1. The amount of odd man rushes the other way. Like there's so
three on the
warts.
power play at least in ththese 2 games that were
Exactly.
breakaway opportunities.
Like what the fuck? Like honestly, what is happening? And it's about how well they play. Once again, if they lose and they play fucking great, okay, eventually they will win. But if you're playing that shitty in front of a goalie who is, you could be running both goalies into the ground, like Sean said. Markstrom might be fucking done and tired and worn out, and then you might run Riddick into the ground too because you're trying to give Markstrom a bit of a break, and it might be a great tandem because of that, because it gives Markstrom a time to rejuvenate and have actually the being healthy enough to play and win and to steal games. But as far as like the Flames players go, I don't know what to think of them. It baffles me, and that's where what we talked about last time, a big trade would shake up the room, or captaincy once again would shake up the room.
Yeah, I came leaving here. I don't know if this is again a Ward thing or a players thing, but the skill level on this team is not it really lacked. I mean, Michael Hutchinson was a guy that Dallas ventilated in the Western Conference semifinals. Like, what is he? Was he like number 5 as the Colorado Avalanche goaltender? And they got 19 shots on him. And I don't think that I don't recall like really them getting a big play, like a beautiful pass across. A lot of crashing the puck, crashing the net. You saw that even against the Oilers. I mean, they were crashing the net. That's great, but there's the skill level, and I don't know if that's the strategy that Ward has implemented, or if this is the team that lacks skill. I mean, you got Johnny Gaudreau, who's skilled. Monahan's a great passer. Lindholm's skilled. It just seemed to me that the offensive creativity lacked, in my mind. Am I wrong?
The only play that I remember having some sort of skill with it was Johnny when he came off the half boards. He deked around a player and then he shot it on net, and that was it. That is legitimately the only time that I remember seeing a play. And you know what? I'm so past blaming Jeff Ward. There's been so many coaches that have come in here and tried to change the way that this core plays. This core needs to be shaken up. Period.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not in dispute of that at all. There needs to be a big shakeup, but I don't know if this is a skill thing, a strategy thing.
I don't think it's a skill thing. That you know that Sean Monahan can quietly put 25 to 30 goals up every year. You know that Johnny Gaudreau can put up 90 to 100 points a year easily. Not easily, but he can do that. You know that Matthew Tkachuk can be a game changer if he wants to be there, if he's not being told to tone it back and that they can't have this every fucking game. There is something, once again, going back to the same fucking thing over and over again. There's something wrong in that room, and they need to change it. Period. I don't know how much more they can just keep on trotting out the same bullshit over and over and over again, and the lack of give a shit. It's so fucking frustrating. It really is. And the thing that I come back to the most is that it's the fucking players. It is not the coach. Yes, the coach can, implement different strategies, different game plays, different lines. But if the core players don't give a fuck and don't care, and they are just doing what they do, then they need to change. Period. And there's so much talk about Sam Bennett. Okay, should we trade him? Should we not trade him? Should we have him onto the, or have him exposed to the entry draft, or not entry draft, but
expansion draft.
Yes, expansion draft. Sorry, Carl meowing like crazy is throwing me off. I can't. There needs something to happen, and I know it's fucking hard for Tridlin to do that, and I don't care if there's going to be a 2-week quarantine for this person coming in or this player coming in. Something needs to happen this season. And it's basically a death march. If we don't have goaltending, it's a death march to the end of the season, and that is unacceptable.
Sean, you may have some other thoughts, and you can get them, but I do want to just pause something else in here as well. The Flames media, Twitter, the reporters of them, came away saying, "Hey, this is positive. You got 3 out of 4 points out of Toronto. Big, everything. It looks like it could be a turnaround. Everything is good." If this was Canucks media, and you blew this 1-0 lead late and got this overtime goal, would you be hearing this positive praise?
No. But that's no, you wouldn't.
Because I do think that there's some legitimate criticism on the way that the Flames played the last 3 minutes of that game, last 3-4 minutes.
Oh yeah, the way I look at that is Devin has a right to be as fired up and upset as he is. If the Flames rode a hot goalie for 2 games here. Austin Matthews was buzzing for most of the game and was unlucky not to score. Mikheyev was unlucky not to score tonight. Riddick made an absolute insane save on him. I think, and as Devin said, there seems to be a lack of confidence in their abilities in the offensive zone, and they're really. I don't listen to enough Flames and Calgary radio to really get have a feeling of it. When I do listen, I listen to Vancouver radio these days. I'm still trying to figure out what to listen to these days. Maybe Bik and Jamie can help me find that one out when we have them on in a few minutes here.
We'll be inviting them, just so you know, everyone. I'm in the midst of inviting them onto the stream right now.
Yeah, and I do think that they do have. I wish the media held the Flames more accountable for these types of these types of performances. I get into a lot of arguments with Canucks fans about being overly analytical and overly critical, not overly critical, very hypercritical about wins, losses, and everything. And it's frustrating to me at times when you can't enjoy the win, when even if it was like the game before this, where it was Riddick that won you the game, but you still have to have that. You still have to have that balance. And the fact that I rarely hear about how fired up Flames fans are and the media are about how a game went really really makes me wonder whether or not they are holding the team accountable.
Well, look, we have a couple of new guests here. Canucks Central. What do we call this? Do we call this Canucks Central in the evening? Nighttime fireside chat with
Canucks Central after dark.
Yeah, we're taking over, man.
Yeah, Canucks Central Redux.
We do Canucks Central noon. I do Canucks Central Saturday. Bik, I think you did a Canucks Central Sunday this Sunday. Yeah. So just find it whenever we can, man. Whenever we can.
This is Bik Nizzar, Jamie Dodd together joining us. First time Bik and I have chatted in person. Jamie and I, of course, and we were kind of just before we transition to the Canucks. Maybe Jamie may have an interesting perspective on this, but we were talking tonight a little bit. The Flames blew the 1-0 lead with final 3 minutes, and we were talking about kind of how the positive. There's a sort of even though they lost tonight, there's a feeling of positivity in Flames land. It's like, hey, we got 3 of 4 points out of Toronto. We were talking about. If the Canucks blew this 1-0 lead, even with 3 minutes ago, how would everyone react?
Yeah, well, full disclosure, I didn't see tonight's game, but I did catch up on the score. But having said that, I mean, you take 3 out of 4 from the Leafs with David Riddick in net, right? Not even Jacob Markstrom, who's been the key to your team for much of this year. I think you're inevitably going to feel pretty good. And Calgary's just, yes, they've been having kind of a meltdown in the last week or so, but they're still in such a stronger position than the Canucks. So it's easier to be kind of okay with an overtime loss, right? Even though you blow the lead. Whereas for the Canucks, it's like, it's just, that's over. That's done. You can't be happy about that anymore.
There's no more moral victories.
No, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I guess it's a fascinating dichotomy that I'm sure Jamie, covered with producing Sportsnet with the Rintoul show.
Yeah.
The different fan art, although the narratives have been somewhat parallel in a lot of ways.
Yes, there's actually been, Calgary's maybe just a couple weeks delayed from where the Canucks were, but I mean, it's funny because I have access to, I think I'm the only person across the company that has access to both the Calgary text message inbox and the Vancouver text message inbox, and it's been pretty funny seeing how closely they resemble each other this year.
Yeah, we've noticed that as well. Someone time travel and Hendricks suggested it's Canucks After Dark.
Yeah, there you go.
There
you go.
There you go.
That's wrong.
Let's flip to the Canucks. Not like there's seems lots to talk about. So I guess we had a poll question. Sean and I differed. Devin and I differed on Saturday. Saying on Sunday, is it over? Is it not? I guess after the Oilers loss, are we digging the grave? We're preparing for next season. Is that the feeling?
I'm kind of a purist where it's like, hey, keep going until you're done. Like the writing's on the wall. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, but Friday and probably next week is probably when it is, because I think right now it's 11% chance somewhere around there to still make it, and things flip so quickly in this division. I do think you have to give it an honest try until it's officially done and it looks too grim. They're very close, but I do think, hey, tomorrow if you get 2 points, suddenly you wake up Saturday or you wake up on Friday, it's like, hey, it's a little sunnier than it was on Wednesday. And I just think for right now, you've got to reduce this all down to You got to get 2 points, and then how does it look on Friday? And then looking ahead to the next game, hey, how does it look on Tuesday? Let's just get 2 points. How does that look on Wednesday? And the longer you can delay that conversation of looking ahead is beneficial for everyone. Like, we're all in this to watch wins. Like, that's what this is about. It's get into the playoffs, get wins, get championships. And the overall health of the franchise of doing what you're talking about and trading away UFAs to get picks and look for ahead to the next year, that's all relevant to a big picture. But until your breath is gone, keep playing.
Yeah, for me, it's, from a team perspective, yeah, you got to do exactly what Bik's talking about, right? Like if you're the coach, the players, even to a certain extent, the management, you got to keep fighting. You can't throw in the towel just yet. Having said that, from kind of a fan and media perspective, like what our conversations are going to be in the immediate near term, I mean, there's only, let's say you think they have a 5% chance of going on a miracle comeback and making the playoffs, which I think is probably roughly accurate. Like, how much breath are you going to waste on talking about something that has a 5% chance of happening, right? So yeah. I think you can acknowledge that chance exists and want the team to, for their own benefit, to keep pushing and pursuing it. But when we start talking about the Canucks, when we're talking about the Canucks on our show, when you guys are talking about it on your show, just inevitably, we're going to start moving on to the other conversation, right? Because one thing only has a 5% chance of happening. So why waste all of your time talking about it when there are these big decisions coming up, like moving on from UFAs and all this other stuff, right?
Sean, where are you at now?
I still think I'm a lot like Bik in that you gotta just be watching for wins. You don't want to be watching to cheer for the lottery. And I agree. It's about 5%. I think is the right to try to for the Canucks to come back. We've seen teams do it in the past, and with this division and the schedule, every game is a 4-point game. So I still have a little glimmer of hope in me, but rationally I'm at the point where you got to start looking at what can be done to help this team take the next step for next season.
And here's the thing, and like why it's a good poll question and why it's a relevant thing to talk about amongst people here. There's no wrong answer, right? Like it's fair to say, well, Tanner Pearson's got to go and Brandon Setter's got to go and Alex Edler, maybe get him to waive. Like that's all well and good and fair to have that conversation. If that's your opinion, you're right. And the people that want to hold on until there's 0% chance, guess what? Like you're right on that too. There's no wrong answer in that.
No, that's true. Yeah. I get what the big question, I guess, where we start is Jim Benning. If we're at 5% to 10%, when is the time to pull the trigger? Is it and now that we saw Claude Julien and Kirk Muller out in Montreal, we do know that there's an appetite for shaking up, and we are in a copycat league. So somebody does something, someone else will do something else. Do we see the trigger pulled on Jim Benning, even though Aquilini expressed confidence 2 weeks ago? And I went and used the air quotes there.
I mean,
has it really been 2 weweeks?
Yeah.
Sorry, Jamie.
Yeah, I think so. No worries. Yeah, it's wild actually that it has, but yes, it has. It's just, it would be a tough look for the organization to do it this quickly, right? And I feel like, I've made it pretty clear on 650 with Bik that I would be moving on from Jim Benning. Like that, I don't have any problem saying that. I think that's pretty clearly the right move to make. It does seem like, and I know Sat's been all over this, that and Elliot Friedman as well, that they really want to hold on until the summer before making that change for whatever reason, right? There's a financial component to that. Maybe they want to get their next guy in place before they make the move. So I would have made the move already, right? And I still think, hey, just go ahead and do it, right? Like if your standard is, if this team misses the playoffs, Jim Benning's gone, well, you can probably just act like they're going to miss the playoffs and make the move now. But I at this point would be pretty surprised if we see something until either right after the season or, towards the very tail end of the season.
Well, then who would you? Sorry, Bik, to cut you off there, but who would you put in there then, Jamie? Like, who's the next GM in line?
That is a great question. The thing is, I find that I'm not an insider. I'm the opposite of an insider, right? Like and people in my position who don't have the inside info, we tend to get hung up on like 2 or 3 big names that we know, right? So obviously, I mean, Mike Gillis is always a huge name in the minds of Vancouver Canucks fans. And like, hey, I like Mike Gillis. I think was a really good executive. I think he'd be a good executive for another NHL team. But there's lots of other candidates, right? So, I'm open to a guy like Gillis, but I do think we get kind of weirdly locked in on the same list of 2 or 3 candidates sometimes. I would be in favor of just doing a thorough search, right? Like I don't have necessarily a preferred candidate in mind. I have thoughts about, the structure of the front office and the general qualities they should be looking for, but I'll keep an open mind when it comes to specific candidates.
I think you're right in the fact that I think it's time to move on. But as much as I want to see them make that a very visible and extensive search, we know that's not the case. That with the history of the GM's replacements under Aquilini, he always seems to have a guy in place right away, and I don't think that should hinder any sort of choice here, because I think that the GM is a job you can do within quarantine. This isn't like you have to be out behind the bench or at practices coaching. Coaching, replacing a coach.
Yeah.
You kind of have to have someone right there ready to go who doesn't have to have quarantine and take care of that. But with GMs, you can watch practice via video. You can do you can build an office inside your hotel room to do all the work that the GM does. So I do think if they make it, I think they will have someone lined up right away, even if that person isn't in Vancouver and needs to quarantine.
Yeah, as far as like when was the time to pull the trigger, for me, a decision one way or another had to be made 2 weeks ago, right? Like when Francesco Aquilini tweeted, you had to either say Jim Benning is gone or these are our guys. Now, would I have backed and done the public vote of confidence? Probably not, but something needed to happen. And it was made. So now we're all on the same page, like fans, players, coaches, everyone's on the same page. Jim Benning is here. Coming. I don't think it's going to be coming unless post deadline. I think it's going to be closer to the end of the season than it is to where we are now. As far as best laid plans, like they've ownership put themselves kind of in this spot, restricting your options of what you can do in the off season. So it's not really on you, and so we'll give you the season. Now, this has gone way worse than anyone can imagine.
Yeah.
They're third in the NHL, or third to last, in points percentage. No one imagined this. They thought they'd be competitive and they can reevaluate Jim Benning's job at the end of the season. Well, that timeline got accelerated, and that's why we're having these conversations.
So, for me, I guess one of the questions then that comes into my mind is, and I'm going to put this as, there was Trevor Linden. He was the president of hockey operations. He was that guy, the Brendan Shanahan guy, the Joe Sakic guy, sort of can get in front of the media, sell the franchise, which, like, let's be honest, Jim Benning that's not his skill.
Yeah.
Do the Canucks need the Trevor Linden position? Which it's tough now because we're in a pandemic, and the Aquilinis, we know that they're not necessarily going to want to pay more money than they want to. But
I mean, my preferred front office structure would be president of hockey operations and general manager, right? And, Trevor Linden was brought in for very specific reasons. I don't think you need to bring in somebody who fits that profile. I mean, there isn't another Trevor Linden, obviously,
no.
But it doesn't have to be someone who's primarily there for PR, right? Which was largely Linden's job to a certain degree. But I do think you need that extra voice in the organization, somebody to be a buffer between the GM and ownership, someone to kind of manage up, as they say, right, to ownership, and just someone with a certain amount of experience and authority around the league as well. And just in general, I'd say, I mean, I'm in favor of having more voices in the room, a more collaborative process, right? Like, I think that's how the best organizations operate, not just in hockey, not just in sports, in other fields as well. So I would be looking to really flesh out a strong front office with, a president, a GM, assistant GMs. That's the general structure that I would prefer.
Yeah, just the more robust department you have, you're bringing in fresh perspectives, you're bringing in different ideas, and if it's they have under optimum conditions on COVID related, they've got a robust staff, right? They've got people doing great work. Chris Gear, Jonathan Wall, there's a lot of people behind the scenes that do great work. It's not always just the GM, but as far as building out a vision for a team, and that's been one of my biggest complaints through 7 years. It's 7 years. I'm not sure I know what Jim Benning's vision of how to play hockey is. And if you bring in two people that can work lockstep together to say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. You manage the day-to-day. I'll worry about the big picture. It can be whichever way. The president or the hockey ops is the big picture guy or the day-to-day, whatever it is. I think that's just the way of the future of how hockey is going to evolve, that more people are going to treat it like a business than a sport.
Yeah.
So would you say that the way he addresses the media is the same way that he kind of addresses his team, not knowing what the fuck he's doing?
I mean, that's a good
Devin's
question.
Our direct person. Devin's the guy that brings the slap shot from the point.
It is an interesting question. I think even if you were a huge proponent of Jim Benning and his record as a general manager, you would say that external communication is not his strong suit, right? Just you saw the furor that when he gave the interview to the Province and Ben Kuzma a few weeks ago, right? And he said, "Oh, with Toffoli, we just ran out of time." I mean, that's shooting yourself in the foot from a public relations perspective, right? But it's an interesting question. I mean, what's his internal communication, right? Right? Because that's an important thing too.
Yeah, as far as does he know what he's doing? I obviously do think he does. Do I think he's been successful at it? No. Based just on track record, right? It's 7 years, 1 playoff win. That's not something that you would, put up as, hey, look at my resume. It's going great. Personally, back in 2018, I was surprised there was an extension because the goal was make the playoffs, right? And they didn't really have success. It was maximize the back end of the Sedins, and that didn't happen. And genuinely, I was surprised he got an extension because usually when your plan fails and you're a first-time GM, you don't get a lot of runway. And he's been extended one more time since then. And here we are, 2021. We're having this conversation. So I get what you're trying to say, Devin. It's just his plan maybe hasn't come off as well, and he certainly hasn't communicated the plan very well publicly. It just when you see the transactions and you see some of the language they use, it doesn't always add up. One year it's meat and potatoes, the other year it's speed and skill, and the next year it's we got to be gritty. It's how do you change it that many times in 5-6 years? You got to let these guys grow into these roles. If you keep changing it, you're never going to be able to fulfill what in your mind you want to do.
Yeah. Sean, did you have something to add to that?
No, I think we've covered a lot of what's frustrated Canucks fans with Jim Benning.
Let's get to then with Benning, Travis Green. This was the first time I think last night was the first time I've really heard from me anyway, the idea of a hot seat question come up. But I guess you blow a 3-0 lead. That's what happens. But right now, my big question is, why wasn't he signed in the offseason? Why wasn't that extension given to him?
It's a great question, and I wish I could answer that. The weird thing is it's easy to say, oh, well, the pandemic, finances, and all that, but it's not as if they're giving him the money right now, right? The money doesn't kick in until next year, when theoretically your finances should be in a much better position. Now, if you're really concerned about your long-term finances, well, you're still going to have a coach of your hockey team, right? So now maybe if you go out and get a rookie, it costs you less than what Travis Green is asking for, but it's hard to kind of square the financial side of it. And you just start thinking, I mean, is it a anticipation from ownership that maybe there will be a new general manager? And at that point, why not just let that guy choose the next coach, right? I don't know if that's the answer. I don't know what the answer is, but it's weird. And that was my biggest problem with Francesco Aquilini coming out and saying, I have full confidence in Travis Green. Well, what you do when you have a coach that you have full confidence in is you give him an extension before he goes into his final year of his contract, right? So that is one of the great mysteries. I think, after the fact of this season, there's going to be a lot of interesting stories and tidbits that come out just because it's been so bizarre and there's been so much drama in front of the cameras, behind the scenes, all of it, I can only imagine. But I think that is one of the kind of great unanswered questions about this Canucks season is why on earth did an extension with Travis Green not happen before the season started?
So, like, this isn't me reporting anything. This is just, talking hypothetically here. But if you wanted to create organizational alignment, right? Like, if you came to the season it's like, hey, front office, we're going to hamstring you. We're not buying guys out. We're really putting the clamps on you, and we'll check back in on this in the offseason. And in doing so, you're also going to evaluate the general manager position. Well, it's fair to exactly do what Jamie's talking about. Will a new GM be willing to work with Travis, or do you want a new GM to bring someone else in? And all those sort of questions come up. But here's the thing: when it comes to contracts, it's a two-way street. So if you're Travis Green and you're like, hey, we want to wait till the offseason to do this. If you're Travis Green, you're probably just like, all right, well, I'm gonna test what my market is then too.
Yeah.
And we've heard this talk of like, hey, he wants to bet on himself, and that's all well and good. Like, if you're in a situation right now and they gave him an extension, an offer today, if you're Travis Green, do you want to accept it, or are you close enough to the finish line to say, well, I'm curious what Seattle wants to say. What's the long-term plan in Montreal? What's this? What's this? So we do have to remember this is a two-way street, and if their intention was to kick the can down the road no matter what, if you're Travis Green, you probably got that message because you didn't get your extension. And at that stage, do you just say, well, I want to see what I'm worth, and if I'm worth $100,000, $300,000, and maybe I get a job in the States, my family, why box halfway through the season when you can wait this out?
And that's once they started the season without a contract in place for him, that was always the most likely option, right? Like every day you go into the season, it's easier and easier for him to wait and not sign an extension. So at this point, I mean, exactly what you're saying, like, yeah, why wouldn't you wait to see what's out there, right? And it like I said, it didn't make a lot of sense to me at the time. It still doesn't make a lot of sense. I understand it from Travis Green's perspective. What I don't understand it from is the Canucks' perspective, really.
I mean, I guess the one thing from Travis Green's perspective that I think I could see is the off season when you lose Markstrom and Tanev, and you can argue the Markstrom signing, whether that was good or not. Tanev is absolutely missed without question, I think, clearly missed. You knew that this team wouldn't be as good. And maybe in some ways you're frustrated working with Jim Benning. Maybe that's one of the things. Maybe, Devin's question about the communication, the internal communication, maybe he doesn't get it. Is like, I don't know if I want to sign here. I kind of want to know what this Canuck, what is this vision about before I know what I'm going to commit to. And you're going to have, you got Green, Brindamore, Tortorella, Tocchet, Boudreau, and Gallant out there. There's going to be 6 or 7. There's going to be some plump positions out there that if you're Travis Green, I think you can betting on yourself is not a terrible idea in this offseason.
But at the same time, you just rattle off 7, 8 different head coaches. There's only 31 teams, and they're going to be 32 next year. It shows that if that is the case, then Green has a lot. Like he's got a lot of confidence and cockiness in himself to think that he could get another job offer, potentially down in the States, or maybe even here in Calgary, with Jeff Ward being on the hot seat too. So to me, that doesn't make much sense. Job security is massive, especially within what's happening in the world right now. So I don't see him betting on himself within this economy. And that's such like I don't know. It feels like such a cop out, but I truly, I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe he just doesn't like Jim Benning and the way that he conducts himself.
I've never got the sense that there's any sort of friction between him and Jim Benning. Like I've never got that sense that they don't see eye to eye, or so. Like never got that sense. If you feel that way, hey man, that's power to you. I've just never got the feeling that they are not working in tandem together and they don't have shared philosophies.
And I think.
But just on the idea of betting on yourself, like it's dangerous. Don't get me wrong, but you kind of do need that cockiness to be like, hey, look, I think I'm worth what I'm worth, and I'm willing to see what it is. And I do tend to believe when you think of how sports are going, most teams in any league, hockey, football, basketball, people are looking for coaches to connect with players. And this younger new generation of the Ron Brindamores you're talking about, and Travis Green and Rick Tocchet, like they kind of know how to do that. And it's not just because they're ex-players. It's because this new style of coach is better suited to the new modern age of athlete.
And I want to be clear, like when we say, Travis Green is willing to bet on himself, I think he would be more than willing. He would have been more than willing to sign an extension with the Canucks, right, at the right number. I just think it's clear they never offered him the right number that he was probably earned. And so I like his preference, I think, was to stay and is to stay and be the coach of the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, you just think about what he's started to build here, the rapport he's started to build with the young players. Like, I'm sure his ideal situation is to be with the Canucks, but the number has to be correct. And I personally think that Travis Green, look, it's always a bit of a crapshoot, right? With the NHL, as you say, man, only 31, about to be 32 jobs. I don't think he would be out of work for long, right? Like, I just think, especially, even coming off a bad season like the Canucks are having, you hear the people around the league talk, and nobody is pinning this on Travis Green, right? And even if fans here in Vancouver might disagree with that, some of them, for Travis Green's next job, it matters more what people around the league think, right? And he's got a pretty easy out. Like, he can point to, Louis Eriksson and Sven Baertschi and on and on and on the list of players he's been given to work with and say, well, hey, what do you want me to do here, right? So I don't think even a lost season like this with the Canucks is going to hurt his market value all that much. And I think, whether it's here in Vancouver or with another organization, there's a very good chance he's going to be coaching next year as well.
Yeah, the way I've looked at this is I think Green definitely has a number in mind in terms of what he's looking for, and he's not going to accept anything less than that, especially right now. I do think, I'm with Bik in terms of that he doesn't have, there wasn't any friction between the two, but I do think that the loss, not being able to handle the loss, the cap issues, and losing Markstrom, Tanev, Toffoli, all of this past offseason, and the additions not necessarily being as not stepping in right away and being as impactful as we all hoped. Yeah, I think it has added to the I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to see what the market bears in the offseason, as opposed to being willing to negotiate a little bit more than with that number.
Yeah, and like I don't want to speak for Beck, but when he says there's no tension between them, like there's disagreements, but that exists between every general manager and every coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that can be part of a really productive, healthy relationship is having that sort of disagreement. I don't think it's the case that Travis Green is has one eye out the door because he doesn't like dealing with Jim Benning. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. I just think it's very interesting to see how you have Calgary, who they're not playing that well, and Jeff Ward's on the hot seat right now. The correlation between the teams and the coaches, Travis Green isn't really on the hot seat as much as Jeff Ward is, even though they are both kind of similar. Travis Green has a year, maybe year and a half more NHL experience than Jeff Ward does, but the amount of heat between the two of them, and the teams are doing pretty much is very, very similar in the play or in this within the season. How that correlates, it's kind of interesting from a Flames perspective.
Well, I think one of the reasons is right. Look who lost Jacob Markstrom and Chris Tanev, and look who got Jacob Markstrom and Chris Tanev, right? So you kind of look at that, you're like, well, hey man, Jeff Ward, we gave you the pieces. I also think it's Jeff Ward came in as the interim coach right after the Bill Peters situation, so he was not, and then they ended up giving him the job. That's always kind of a tenuous place to be in. It's not as if they did their search and landed on Jeff Ward. Now, obviously, they had a chance to replace him. They could have said, "Hey, great job being the interim coach. We're going to go another direction." They chose to remove the interim tag, but it just feels like because the team went out, spent money, improved. I mean, that's what happened with Claude Julien, right? That team went out and spent a ton of money in the offseason, and expectations were high. And Claude Julien is one of the most respected coaches around the NHL, but the reason he got fired ultimately is because those expectations went up so much, right? And I think that's the biggest difference between what happened in Montreal, what's happening in Calgary, as you say, with Jeff Ward on the hot seat, and what's happening here in Vancouver. Is just internally, and probably also for a lot of fans as well. I think the expectations of Vancouver were lower. Not that they would have said that publicly, but I think they were lower than they were for either Montreal or Calgary this year.
Yeah.
That, and I think fans of all in all three, as you said, the Flames and the Habs definitely spent money. They added to their roster. The Canucks lost more than they added.
Yeah.
There's a lot of anger and frustration with those moves in Vancouver, which is why the hot seat is Jim Benning, not Travis Green. I think a lot of fans are a lot more willing to see that the players are still playing for Travis Green. Travis Green's systems, for the most part, seem to be working. It's just that there's a lack of the team makeup is the issue more than the coaching.
100%, right? That's why the more of the blame is falling on Jim Benning than Travis Green here, for sure.
Tomorrow's game is actually going to be really interesting for that, exactly what you're talking about, Sean, is if the players come out with a great effort, given everything that's happened, right? They've blown a bunch of leads. They've been blown out in general. But if they show up with a good effort, that to me is like, hey, they're still playing for Travis Green. And the toughest thing for coaches to do in this era is to get people to buy in. And if you still see a good effort, that to me is a team still listening to their coach, still trying for their coach. And this idea that it's things get pinned on Travis Green, to me, kind of falls by the wayside, pending what happens tomorrow.
Right. In terms of, so let's maybe transition this to the team. What are your thoughts on the line combinations were juggled up a bit? What are your thoughts on the changes?
I mean, I've seen some people on Twitter kind of saying like, what are you doing? Putting JT Miller on the third line with Brandon Sutter. I'll say, first of all, at this point, line combinations almost feel beside the point. Like, yeah, like we got to talk about it. I like talking about line combos, but maybe this will make them finish, I don't know, in 23rd instead of 24th in the league or whatever, right? Like those are kind of the stakes that we're talking about here. Having said that, I mean, why not make some changes? Like, what's working for you so well? What is sacrosanct about what this team has been doing thus far, right? So with JT Miller in particular, he still needs to get going. He still needs to find that gear that we saw from him last year. And, we've had people text in, Bik, as you know, like saying, put him in the press box, do this and that. I don't think that's the answer, but yeah, try shifting the chemistry a little bit. Why not, right? I don't have a problem with it at all.
The one guy I saw get bumped up to me that made a lot of sense at this stage was Jake Virtanen going to the top six. And he hasn't played well, don't get me wrong. But to me, I look at it and say, what's the difference between Jake Virtanen and Tanner Pearson? If Tanner Pearson's not scoring, he's got deficiencies in his game too. He's better defensively, don't get me wrong, but the speed trade-off, I'll take that. I'll take the better shot. He doesn't necessarily get into the dirty areas as well as Tanner Pearson, but it was time to try. If you're going to try something new, it had to be Adam Gaudette and or Jake Virtanen going to the top six. Now they shifted it more than just that. Miller goes down, Hoglander goes up. That's fine, but one of Gaudette or Virtanen had to go into the top six, and it was, to me, Pearson was the candidate to go out. Now he stayed in, but if you're trying to build someone's value up, Tanner Pearson, I feel like, is steady at his value come trade deadline. Yeah. That matters. But if you want to try to build someone up, Jake Virtanen's got a big circle next to his name, and give him an opportunity with some better players, see what he can do.
And I probably would have leaned towards putting Gaudette up in the top six just because, you look at some of the underlying numbers. He's been generating a ton of chances, hasn't been rewarded, maybe give him a little bit of ice time. Let him play with some more talented players, and maybe that production starts to come. Whereas with Jake Virtanen, I mean, I'm so beyond hoping that anything is going to spark his game, right? So I think it's kind of a doomed experiment from the start. But I get why they're doing it. Like you said, hey, maybe if we can somehow boost his value here, it helps him down the road.
And it's a wake up call to Miller too, right?
Yeah.
To get the fuck going, because he hasn't played up to what he did last year. And if you kind of look at the Pittsburgh Penguins when they had Phil Kessel, he was on the third line. They had Malkin, Crosby. They tried Kessel and Malkin together. That didn't work, and they put him down on the third line. And having that depth between the first, third, and second line, it might not be a bad thing, especially with the way that he plays. He plays a bit of a grittier game. He hits a lot and he shoots a lot. So it actually might be beneficial in the long run, along with having Höglander on that top line with Pettersson. I think that's massive. And he's deserved it, Höglander.
And one thing that Miller, I think himself even said today is, with Tyler Mott out, like he's been killing penalties. They've been in all these close games, so you're running the lotto line out there constantly towards the end of the games. Like Miller's minutes have been really high. Recently, he's on the first power play unit as well. So, it's the kind of thing where maybe if he's playing 18 minutes a night instead of 20 minutes a night, is he significantly more effective in those 18 minutes, right? You just dial it back a little bit, give him a little bit of an easier workload. Does that get him going, at least in the short term? And I don't know, maybe not. But as I said, like, what are you doing that's working so well that you can't change things? Like, you can definitely change things and try things out right now.
Yeah, actually, like his press conference today, just kind of reflecting upon it, because I know everyone's frustrated. They want to see the JT Miller that they saw last year. I actually really liked his press conference today. He didn't pull any punches. He's like, hey, like, this is who I am. I'm not going to apologize for being frustrated. And you go through his history, and I asked him the question. It's like, hey, like, he's never missed the playoffs in his career.
Wow.
Right? And so, like, this is the first time, and like, I'm talking, like, go back to the OHL, right? Like, he played in the playoffs then. And the one time he had a bad season with the Rangers, well, he got traded to Tampa Bay and he went to the playoffs. So this is a new experience for him too. And he admitted, like, this is this first time where he's had a 20-game stretch where it hasn't been going well. And for an older player, that's kind of funny for him to be going through something for the first time.
That just in general, that idea of players going through this season, that's something I'm really curious to watch as the Canucks play out the stretch here. Like, obviously lots of players have been through, playing out the string in a bad team before, but as with everything else, I think it's different this year because you're not even getting a lot of the fun stuff about being in the NHL, right? Like, you're not hanging out with your buddies on the road, right? You're not, signing autographs for little kids who don't know what the score was, but are just happy to see you after the game, right? Like, there's so many of those random perks that have been taken away. I feel like this year, more than even most years, it's going to be really hard to stay focused, stay committed when the playoffs aren't a possibility down the stretch. And I think that's a storyline to watch, frankly, for the Canucks, because it's set in so quickly here, right? Like, it's not like they're looking at a final 10 games that don't mean a lot. I mean, they're looking at like 30 plus games, 2 months, where they basically know, yeah, it's not happening for us. And I don't know. I don't know how it's going to play out. Maybe it amounts to nothing, but I do think that's something to watch, is just what kind of mood and emotion we see from the players down the stretch here.
Yeah, and especially as you mentioned, not getting out of it, like, not like you're in a bubble. It's not like the bubble, like the playoff bubble, but it is your own personal bubble. Like, you cannot get away from the game, and it really in any particular, like, you're pretty much stuck with everybody. And it's weird with JT Miller too, because like, he flew into Calgary, he goes in, he plays, and then the frustration just set in so quickly. Like, because maybe he's always been frustrated. And this is the first we knew about it because we got to hear the F bombs and the swear words and all of that because of no fans.
Well, he admitted today, like, he's like, I've always been like this. It just now you're looking a lot closer because they're losing. And so, like, that's why, like, I kind of like what he said today. He admitted, he's like, I've always been frustrated. I've always been loud. I've always been, high standards. And because he's always been on winning teams, it's never been harped on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are the type of players that you kind of want on your team, the ones who give a shit and who actually care. And the the way that he comes about it might be a bit brash and not well brought up. But those are the people that you win with, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure.
And like, he's not the leader on the team. We've called him like the alpha male or the alpha dog on the team. And like, he probably sets the mood for the team, but he's not the leader of the team. And you think of, hey, what's transpired for the team? And like that's a responsibility on JT Miller's part to maybe, change your habits a little bit to understand that, hey, you kind of set the mood and the tone for the team. Because when you are destructive, hey, guess what? You're blowing 3-goal, 2-goal leads. So maybe that's on him to change a bit. But for as far as like leadership and all that sort of stuff, it's interesting to look at that angle of what you're talking about, Devin. It's like, yeah, I want guys like that on my team. And Travis Green was like very like full of praise today. Just talking about like, hey, he loves JT Miller and all that sort of stuff. It's, you kind of want those guys on your team.
And just, to your point, Kevin, about how quickly the frustration set in for him flying into Calgary and playing in those games, outside of the first 2 Edmonton games, right, to start the season, you really couldn't have scripted a more frustrating start for the entire Canucks team, right? Because game 3, you get shut out by Jacob Markstrom, right? Then you lose again to Markstrom and Tanev. And then Tyler Toffoli comes in and just torches you, right? Like, looks like freaking Rocket Richard against you in your own building and is having an incredible time doing it and sticking it to you. It could not have been a more demoralizing start. And for a guy like JT Miller, who didn't have his legs fresh at the time and is that kind of emotional, heart on his sleeve kind of guy, like, I can't imagine how frustrating that would have been. And for whatever reason, they were just never able to get out of that rut, right? Like, it spiraled so quickly. And I think the frustration was so significant. It took them forever to even try to get out of it.
Yeah. And as was mentioned earlier, you're not having the fun stuff of being an NHL player, as well as you don't have the same routine. Like, I wonder how many of these guys are routine guys, and it took them a while to figure out what the routine is for this year. And I bet you JT Miller is one of those guys as well. So it took him. You add that to the mess at the start of the season with getting shut up with Markstrom and then getting torched by Toffoli. Like, I don't think the confidence was really there after that. And then they're struggling so hard to get it back. The process seems to be close now, but they're not getting the results.
Yeah.
And they're making mistakes that aren't, that are costing them. I mean, they're not looking like a beer league team anymore, but I feel like that we shouldn't be applauding that.
No.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? Like, every team, unless you're a really, top 3 kind of dominant team, you're going to have a stretch of a season where you're playing pretty well, but the results just aren't coming, right? That's hockey. There's a lot of chance. There's a lot of randomness. That's always going to happen. The problem for the Canucks was they dug themselves in such a hole that they couldn't withstand a stretch like that, right? Like, they needed to have consistent results for the rest of the season. And I think what you're also seeing is that even when they play pretty well from a quote unquote process standpoint, they're still not getting big special teams moments. They're not getting big saves. They're turning the puck over in bad situations, right? So they're doing like a lot of good process things, and they're still killing themselves in those key moments. And it's just overall not good enough. And they're not a team that can, withstand a bunch of self-inflicted mistakes and still win a hockey game, right? And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing, even if they play pretty well, if you make 2 or 3 key mistakes, you're probably going to lose.
The other thing, and looking back at the Calgary series too, and saying, okay, if Calgary took 3 of 4, then that's curtains. And the problem I'm thinking with that, looking back, is you can't take it one game at a time. You can't go, okay, we're playing Thursday and then it's Calgary and then we're off to Edmonton and then we're off to Winnipeg on a road trip. You're looking at all of these in big series. So even now with the Oilers, you lost yesterday. Now this is a huge must-win game. If you want to increase that percentage a little bit, you got to win this game. Like, the results of the series matter more than just one game at a time. You literally cannot now take this one game at a time.
No, but I think that's a conversation for us, right? And I've been using the term like plus and minus 3 and 4 and how you got to win these series. But if you're the coaching staff, if you're the players, if you start looking at it as like, hey, how do we get back into the playoffs? That's like too big of a task. That's like coming back from a 4-goal deficit and saying, hey, this one shot is going to tie the game. It doesn't work like that. And for the players, they've got to reduce this down to, hey, I just need to have a good shift. Like, you have to strip everything down to, can I make a play on this shift? And then, hey, can the next guy do that? And then can the next guy do it? And then, hey, look, like we had a good stretch of play. Turn that into a period. Turn that into a game. Like, that's how the players and the coaching staff have to approach this. For us and analyzing the situation, you're absolutely bang on. You can't just, it's more than just 2 points. You've got to approach this upcoming Winnipeg series as you have to go +4. You have to. Like, that's the situation they've put themselves in. But from the team's perspective, it's much, much smaller.
I do wonder, though, Bik, if, like, you look at, we're talking about the frustrating parts of the season early, right? If Tyler Toffoli comes in and it's one game and he kills you, right, and he scores a hat trick, well, it's one game, we can move on. We're playing, Columbus or Arizona the next night, like, whatever, who cares, right? But he's there the next night and the night after that, right? And it's like, oh my God, like, we have to keep playing this guy. And then you play him again 2 weeks later in Montreal. Like, I wonder, even despite their best efforts and the, like players say it all the time, right? One game at a time. That is such a mantra in hockey. It does seem like it would be harder to stick to this year, though, because, your failures and your frustrations are just constantly there in your face over and over again.
I'm just talking from this moment forward.
No, for sure. Yeah. I know you.
Yeah. And even from Toffoli's perspective, you score 3 goals, you're coming back the next day, coming to the same arena, playing the same team. You're like, you're feeling it. You're coming in feeling it for sure. Right. So, Sean, did you have a question? I feel like I'm dominating questions right now. The last half.
One of the things I'm enjoying watching is the young players on the Canucks. Like, we're all just drooling over Höglander.
So you're the one that's finding silver linings.
I got to, like, I can't be grumpy and angry all the time. But the other ones that really surprised me so far has been Olli Levy. I know it looks like he's probably on the out for the next game, but I've really liked his game and I really liked the development of his game. And yes, it's so hard to separate him from where he was drafted and who was drafted after, but it looks like he's going to be an NHLer at this point. Like he's going to play 3, 4, 5. I think he could play 6+ years in the NHL.
Which was basically what we said like last year, that, hey, if he just gets to a point where he's an NHLer, from where it cratered to, that's viewed as a win. It's not a win for, hey, drafting him 5th overall, all that sort of stuff. And if he becomes something, hey, that's even greater. But they, like, if you try to figure out things that you need to solve in your roster, no, you need to have depth D-men. And to solve that internally and not have to spend $2 million on a Jordy Ben or a $700K on an Austin Fantenberg, like, he looks capable. And he looks like he's got the craft and the smarts of why he was drafted 5th overall. Now it's taken longer for him to get to the stage and all that sort of stuff. But you see of why he was such a highly touted prospect.
My thing with Olli Levy is it is a huge win, from a year ago, but he's playing NHL games for you and not getting killed. The only thing is now, because now the conversation has started to turn to, can he be a top 4 guy down the road? I'm still for a long time now, in every step of Olli Levy's career, I've been in I'll believe it when I see it mode. And that's not a slight against him. It's just that's where he was, right? Like Vic's saying, will Olli Levy play in the NHL? Well, I'll believe it when I see it. Now I believe it because I'm seeing it. And I kind of feel that way about him moving up the lineup as well. Like, I'm not thinking about next steps, especially because the thing I can't escape with Levy is what's his biggest flaw? It's his skating, it's his foot speed, right? And the league's not getting slower, right? Like, and skating's not getting less important. Like, those trends aren't going anywhere. So if it's a problem right now, it's going to be more of a problem unless he makes some, remarkable improvements in that area. It's going to be more of a problem in 3 years, in 4 years, in 5 years, right? So that is the major concern I have kind of projecting Olli Levy, is that his biggest flaw is something that the league is, better able to exploit every year now. But at the same time, I don't want to sound like I'm crapping over a guy for finally making it to the NHL and proving he can play, right? Because good for him, and maybe he can be a sixth defenseman for the Canucks for a bunch of years here. It's just anything more than that, I'm still very much in believe it when I see it mode.
I think it was last week when we were doing Central, and we got the same text, right? Like, people are hyped about him. I get it. Yeah. He's having success, and it was the same conversation. Like, hey, maybe he could play top 4. And the people are trying to shuttle him into the Sammy Salo, Alex Edler, category of Canucks D-man. And I was just like, can he go through his Ben Hutton phase first? Like, can he get 200 games? Like, let's view him as Troy Stetcher and have a handful of games where we're like, hey, this guy's exciting. Let's finish that process, which might take another season on top of this. And then let's invite the conversations of what the future looks like and being a top forward. Maybe he has a 6, 7, 8-year career, but let's finish evaluating this process. It's not over yet.
Yeah, for sure.
And also, I wonder in the off season, and maybe it's too early to bring this up, but there may be, if one of the areas you're going to have to revamp for sure is that defense. You've got your Myers. I don't know. I got to be honest. There's been spectacular times with Nate Schmidt, but there's been times I'm just like, what are you doing, Nate Schmidt? So,
I think Nate Schmidt is I think this time next year, people are going to be really happy with Nate Schmidt as a Vancouver Canuck. I think he's actually played okay. It's just it seems like every mistake he's made has immediately ended up in the back of his net, and he's also been involved in some goals that I wouldn't even call mistakes on his part, but they just look weird. Like that one that squeaked through. Was that even the last game, or was it the game before against Winnipeg? I don't know.
The game before.
Yeah, and it squeaks through Holtby, and he ends up tapping it over the goal line. It's like, well, that's not really a mistake. He was trying to make a goal-saving play, and it just didn't work out. But it looks bad because it's Nate Schmidt again, right? So I've gone on a bit of a roller coaster with Nate Schmidt because I was really high on the trade when it happened. Obviously, a disappointing start, but I do think you look how he's playing recently. You look at a lot of the underlying numbers, and he's going to be fine.
And to be fair, on the trade, they won the trade.
Oh, 100%.
Even today, even if you're not happy with Nate Schmidt, they still won the trade. If they traded him today, they would get significantly more than what they just gave up. That's just the reality of the situation. So as far as asset management, that's a big win.
Yeah.
Along with the fact that he's a boy's boy, he's a player's player, and the fact that he can't, I feel like he'd be the guy organizing all the going to the bar, hanging out, come over to my place, if COVID wasn't happening, and not having the cohesion with going to a brand new place, not being able to hang out with his teammates and create those connections and have that chemistry is massive.
Yeah, I will say though, in a time like this when there's losing streak, it's this is when the Beagles, the Schmidts should have earned their money more so. It's you were brought in here to be a positive voice, and they are nonstop positive guys. It's not an act. It's not lip service from hockey men across the entire universe of saying, hey, these are positive guys, good for the room. They just genuinely are constantly optimistic people. And it's that's what's kind of concerning. And I get it, Schmidt trying to find his, where his voice is in the locker room, it being 20 some odd games into a season and a new team. And I thought what Braden Holtby did when he looked stared down JT Miller, said something that to me was a important turning point of, hey, here's a new guy. And I'm sure Nate Schmidt kind of followed suit, and his plays improved since then too. I felt like that moment really started to turn it for those two guys. And Holtby obviously faltered a bit, but to me, Nate Schmidt has really been better since Braden Holtby did that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I agree with Jamie in the fact that next year at this time, I think we're going to be looking at that trade and applauding it the way I think we applaud the Miller trade now, even though the Miller trade was a lot more risky and with everything. But that blue line is definitely going to need another revamp again come this offseason. The right side it's a mess. You can play Schmidt there, and he's great. he'll be good there. But Tyler Myers is a lot better suited as a low, like second pair at best role. I've liked him with Ulevi on the third pair, but you need to find someone else there. Plus, you've got Alex Edler needing a new contract. Is it time to move on from him? Because he's someone who needs to be a third pair D-man at this point in his career too. So I'm really going to be interested to see. That's why Ulevi is so interesting to watch for me this year, as well as Chatfield, how Rathbone does down in Utica now that they finally sent him down there. Because those are the three guys that I think you could legit see taking a step into this blue line next year. And even then, is that really good enough?
Well, and I think, Bik kind of mentioned about fans wanting to jumpstart Olli Juolevi into an Alex Edler role. And that's why, right? Because Alex Edler's contract is up and you need somebody to step into that top four, and you can kind of project, steady puck-moving guy who's not very flashy back there. And the thing that complicates it, because you're right, the defense does need a revamp, is you don't want to be dipping into free agency, and you're really not going to be able to dip into free agency to go get a legit top four defenseman, right? Like, if you're bringing in new people in free agency, it's going to have to be bargain hunting, just given what their cap situation is going to be in this summer. And it does seem like they need, first of all, Olli Juolevi to continue developing, but then a guy like Jack Rathbone to take a major leap forward, right? Or a Jalen Chatfield to take a big leap forward or something. They need those cheap internal solutions because it's going to be really hard, at least this summer, to go out and bring in external additions to your blue line.
And throw in Jet Wu's name in there as well, right? But the interesting element to what free agency is going to be is, does the market completely crater? Right?
Yep.
We saw it a bit happen already, but now add in a whole season worth of no revenue across the league, right? So there are interesting names that, like, if you want to go on the right side, like a David Savard's name, he's UFA. Is that something you look at? That does he get? I think he's making 4.2 now. Is he going to get close to that? I'm not a big Adam Larson guy, but like he's going to be a UFA. Ryan Murray is a UFA. And there are enough names to start going through it. It's like, oh, okay, well, what is the status of these players, and does the market overall just completely drop? And instead of a $4 million player, is he now a $1.5, $2 million player for 1 year, just to stabilize everything and see what happens in a year's time?
Yeah, and you'll have the prove it situations too. Like a lot of players, like you look at a situation like Tyson Barrie as an example, signed a prove it year in Edmonton. Is he going to need to sign another prove it deal in Vancouver? As in, I'm just tossing that out. He still may need to sign a prove it deal.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, and so, Bik, you're telling me that the logos on the helmets aren't bringing enough revenue in, eh? Weird. Weird.
I was trying to put the logo on my hat.
Isn't it weird how I haven't seen anybody on Twitter saying that, I'm turning this game off because there's a Rogers logo on the helmet? No, it doesn't seem to have happened a single time, shockingly, right?
Yeah.
No, not at all. My question on the back end, though, in all seriousness, is who do you see beside Quinn Hughes? Because losing Chris Tanev, from an outsider's perspective, it seems like Quinn Hughes is kind of struggling 5-on-5, not having that stability with Chris Tanev beside him. And if you're not going to bring in Savard or Larson, who would probably benefit him and would definitely help him thrive as a wheel and deal puck moving skating defenseman, then who do you guys see beside him to help him grow? Because he's still a young player.
Well, I mean, just for this year, I would like to see the Hughes and Schmidt pairing at some point, right? And now I think that's maybe a little bit too much of, putting all your eggs in one basket in terms of probably your top two defensemen going forward. Do you want to have them split over, different pairs instead to give you a bit more depth? But I would like to see that. And then, in general, I will say, look, obviously him and Chris Tanev were a very effective pairing last year. I am less concerned with who plays next to Quinn Hughes than I am with who fills out the other spots in the top four, right? Because Quinn Hughes, I know his plus minus is ugly this year. He had a tough start to the season. I think he was dealing with something physical early in the season. His skating wasn't quite right. Maybe still isn't up to the level we're used to seeing it at. But I'm going to bet on Quinn Hughes, right? And I think he is capable. I mean, we've seen it even in stretches with Jordy Ben this year, right? Where they've been a really effective pairing. And it's Quinn Hughes doing the heavy lifting there, right? So I don't think you can't completely ignore the question of who plays with Quinn Hughes, but I'm also not – if I were the Canucks, I wouldn't be spending a lot of energy trying to find the perfect partner. It's like Quinn Hughes is really, really good. He's going to make a lot of other guys look really, really good. I would be dedicating my resources elsewhere, I think.
Yeah, the long term is going to be the difficult question. Kevin, I knew you brought up Edler, right? They need a succession plan of what the top four is going to look like. If that's Nate Schmidt going back to his left side, okay, that's something. And Yul Levy's there, and okay, that's something. And if Rathbone shows up, then you can start tinkering around with Myers and Schmidt on the right side. But the machinations of what the top four look like is going to be really interesting, pending on what happens with their decision with Alex Edler. And it just the reason I like the Nate Schmidt deal is it gave you a succession plan because they didn't have one. Like Yul Levy, okay, cool, I get it. He's stabilized his career a little bit. Rathbone, you can be excited about, but like, what is the plan next year for your second pairing left-handed D-man behind Quinn Hughes? Now, at least break glass in case of emergency. It's Nate Schmidt. Now you need to solve your right side, but they have a problem to figure out with Alex Edler leaving or if he's coming back, whatever it is. They needed a succession plan. So Nate Schmidt can be that. You'd like to see another name maybe pop up, but the how the rest of the top four shakes out for next year is the overarching question here, not just who's playing with Quinn Hughes.
Yeah.
Is because we've been through this a few times. I'm just going to ask: should we just forget that just assume that Alex Edler is not waiving his no trade and he's finishing out the year here?
I would be stunned if in the middle of a pandemic, Alex Edler waives his no trade. Like absolutely floored. I honestly can't imagine. I mean, would you be like, hey, yeah, honey, like I just want to go play in Boston for a few months, but I'll be back soon, right? Like, no, I'd be shocked.
There's rumors. Sorry, Bik, go ahead.
Me personally, I wouldn't even ask him.
Yeah,
I'm kind of a legacy guy and a culture guy and all that sort of stuff. And I personally wouldn't ask him. I just think he's been a bedrock of the franchise. He's going to the Ring of Honor, all that sort of stuff. I just wouldn't put him in the position to ask. But do I expect him to waive? Probably not. Sat has made this point. Satyar Shah, of course, has made this point. Is he doesn't expect him ever to waive, but the one place he would potentially. This is Sat just opinionating, not reporting anything. He's like he would be interested to see if he would waive for Calgary.
Well, that was the thing last year. Was that was a rumor that he was he was being asked to waive to be traded to Calgary. Or maybe that was 2 years ago.
It was 2 years ago.
Yeah, it would have been 2 years ago.
Yeah. So it was that's definitely potential, and he didn't want to do it. And that's how much closer can he get to Vancouver than Calgary?
But now Chris Tanev and Jacob Markstrom are there, man. You gets to reunite with his boys in Calgary. I don't know. Like I'm not predicting it at all, but I can see the logic behind what Sat's saying.
The one long shot place would be Calgary.
Yes.
I think. I think is Sat's point there. Now,
but even then, like Calgary, is Calgary going to be in the playoff? That's the thing, right? Like it'd be one thing if Calgary looked like they were primed to go on a Stanley Cup run, but what, you're going to waive to go help a team make a push for the final playoff spot? Like, I don't know about that.
Yeah. What about the goaltending? Where are we at? I mean, obviously, we're not getting to Markstrom, but it hasn't been awesome. But at the same time, has it been terrible?
No, it's been okay.
Yeah.
Now, the environment in front of them hasn't been okay.
No.
Like you can be okay if you are the Carolinas and the St. Louises of the world that can, apply pressure and keep chances minimal and, lower high danger scoring chances. And if you have okay goaltending, okay, look, like Peter Mrazek can thrive and James Reimer can thrive, all that sort of stuff. This team is not limiting high danger scoring chances. And Braden Holtby, who I thought would be better and I still have a little bit of hope for, has been getting exposed.
Yeah.
It's the only way to say it.
The goaltending has been so weird this year because it's never really been the reason they've won a game, and has barely been the reason they lost. Like that Braden Holtby performance against Winnipeg, you could probably say that, but there hasn't been a ton of games where you look at it and say the Canucks goalie made the difference one way or another. It has become very clear that Thatcher Demko is the Canucks' best goalie this year, which isn't a big surprise, right? No. Based on his pedigree and based on what Braden Holtby did in Washington last year. And Bik and I had this conversation on Central this week, I think, or last week. I don't know. It all runs together. But, when the season started and you were pushing for the playoffs, it made sense to kind of go 50-50 and see if one guy could step up and say, I'm the number one goalie, right? And you were going to go 50-50 until that happened. At this point, Thatcher Demko is clearly better, and the season probably is more about developing Thatcher Demko for the future anyway. So I think we're going to see a run of Thatcher Demko starts here unless he completely drops the ball and doesn't, perform so poorly that you have to go back to the 50-50 split. But just given what they're trying to do for the future and given who's playing better right now, like this should be Thatcher Demko's crease as the number one goalie, the clear number one goalie for the rest of the season.
I would agree. But then what do you do with Holtby? Because you have a 2-year contract. You were exposing him without question.
Oh, yeah.
You really hope Seattle likes Braden Holtby.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because honestly, like, worst case scenario is you come back with Braden Holtby and Thatcher Demko. And like I know we're talking about $23 million and how much cap space they have right now. If Seattle solved one of your problems and made it $28 million, man, there would be a lot of happy executives in that front office to say, hey, look, we got an extra $4.3 million as far as coming off the cap that we can allocate towards Demko and Pettersson and Hughes.
Yeah, if he doesn't improve his performance this year, it's kind of hard to see Seattle taking him, right? Unless they just really, really want that kind of veteran guy who has the reputation. I mean, everyone raves about Braden Holtby, right? And you hear him in interviews. He's very thoughtful, like obviously a really good guy. So maybe there's some attraction there. It's not as if Vancouver's going to be exposing a lot of other particularly attractive guys to take, right? If you're Seattle, I will say if you just start to kind of game out the situation with the Canucks overall and the front office and all of that, like let's say hypothetically they do make a general manager change this summer, that GM is going to come in and they're not going to have a ton of pressure to win right away, right? Because they're going to be able to say, we still got Louis Eriksson on the books, right? We're still dealing with, I think, the Luongo recapture for another year after this, right? We've got Braden Holtby, we've got Jake Virtanen, right? They're going to be able to kind of take a year to just breathe while all those contracts come off the books. So it's kind of unfortunate that they might be saddled with that for next year. But if you look at it, they already have a bunch of dead money, and I don't know how much that $4 million or whatever it is going to affect their plans for next year.
Well, then who would it be that that Seattle would take if it wasn't Holtby?
I guess who are the candidates? Like David Riddick.
No, he means from the Canucks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, from the Canucks. Oh,
I mean, I've heard Cole Lynn's name thrown out there, but I mean, really, it's like I'd have to look at it again, but I think it's basically like a Holtby, Tyler Myers, if he's exposed, which I doubt they would do also, or a pretty off the board candidate, right? Like, I mean, Jake Virtanen might be exposed if he's still with the team. Wouldn't surprise me, I guess that's an option, but there's not a clear like, oh, we have to take this guy. So I don't know. It's a good question, really.
Yeah, when I look at it, I wonder why the Canucks would expose Cole Lind. You look at who's available, like who they would protect instead of him, and I'm like, why would you do that? Like, because you look at who they can expose, they could get a significant amount of money off their books next year. The one thing that goes well for the Canucks with all their dead money for next year and the expansion draft is they're all 1-year deals for Seattle. Holtby, Beagle, Roussel are the big three. Those three, all 1 year left. So if you want to bring in sort of a spark plug in Roussel, a goalie who can be sort of your 1 year get shelled goalie, and then your or a fourth liner who can be a good in the room, you're only tying up your cap for a little, like 1 year, and they still have with the expansion draft rules, they have to draft a certain amount of cap when in the original draft. So I'm looking at it going, if the Canucks do it right, they almost force Seattle to take some cap off their hands, or take a flyer on some AHLer young AHLer who may not pan out.
Yeah, it might come down to, would they prefer to take on some bad money, or would they prefer to almost just burn the pick and take, like Josh Tevis or something, right? Like, just like, hey, we're not going to use. No, but you know what I mean? Like, we're not going to use this pick, so, like, it wouldn't be him. But you know what I mean, right?
No, but, like, I'm not burning a pick to save Cole Lind.
No. I mean, from Seattle's perspective, right? Like, when they survey what's available from the Canucks, there's a good chance it comes down to either someone on a bad contract or just a total flyer, like, AHL player. Right? You know what I mean? And do they just decide to take the AHL guy rather than the bad money?
Like,
that's a possibility.
And
the forwards right now. Like, the forwards are... The forwards are Besser, Horvat, Miller, Pedersen, Mott, and then you have a question of the last two, right? I'm probably exposing Jake Virtanen, but it's probably Gaudette and McEwen to me, or Gaudette and Lind, or Gaudette or McEwen and Lind. It's two of those three.
Yes,
and
exactly.
I just don't imagine there's a scenario where, like, one of those guys to me is as appealing as, Jalen Chatfield, or. Like, there's no way it's Josh Tevis. It could be Jalen.
No, that was just a name I threw out, right? Sure. But, like, it probably would be that extra forward. But even then, like, that's a very manageable loss for the Canucks.
Yeah, if you can't replace Josh Tevis in your organization, or Cole Lind, you've got bigger problems.
Yeah, or Zach McEwen, even, as much as like, we all like him. Right?
I'm a big fan, but you should be able to replace him.
Yeah.
I do not see Seattle doing any favors for Vancouver in giving or taking cap space from them, or taking a big cap hit from them at all. So if they do, then I just think that's a big miss on their part.
I think it's going to just depend on what they're. Sorry, Sean. I'll just quickly say I think it depends on where they decide to go and goal.
Yeah, and like I said, they have to draft a certain amount of cap available, and it all comes down to who's available on all the other 29 teams, because Vegas doesn't have to expose anyone.
Yeah. Was there any other questions that you guys had? The only one I had just one quick one. What? Go ahead, Sean.
I said go ahead there, Kev.
Oh, okay. We kind of quickly talked about this. I just wanted to get your perspective on on Pedersen, not the McDavid, Matthews, all this conversation. I'm not putting Pedersen in that light. That's not my question. But do you think the NHL has spotlighted him enough as a face of the franchise type of guy that the NHL can get market behind? You know what I mean? Like, this is one of the guys that we should be watching is Petey.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, the NHL doesn't really do that particularly well with anybody. Like, they did it with Crosby and Ovechkin. They're trying to do it with McDavid and Austin Matthews. But outside of that, like, what star has the NHL done a good job of promoting? Like, even you think of, like, Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews in Chicago. And Chicago was in all of those Winter Classics and going on Stanley Cup runs. And, like, I never got the sense that the NHL was succeeding in elevating those two as celebrities, right? Or like crossover stars with appeal to casual fans. So in general, I would like to see the NHL do more to promote young stars. Like, sure, why not with Elias Pettersson, right? Like, he is going to be one of the top players in the game for a long time to come. It's not in their skill set, really. I don't know if they have the ability to do it.
And the inverse of that is how many stars are willing to do it.
Yep.
Right. To be honest, like, who's the biggest social media star? Who's the biggest promotable star? It might be Paul Bissonnette.
Yeah.
Right. And just think, like, that's not a first line player. McDavid's a reluctant superstar. He's cringing with photos at the airport with fans. How ready is he to be the face of a league? Yeah. So I do think there is there's just the hockey component or the hockey player component of how much are they willing to accept to be superstars in a sport that's all about conformity and all about marching orders and all that sort of stuff. The other part is how much do players take ownership of their own brand? And think of what Elias Pettersson has done this offseason. I don't think he's looking at the NHL to promote my brand. How can I just do it on my own? And I just think, going back to the modern athlete, this is what they think of, and they try to create new revenue streams for themselves outside of hockey, whether it be Twitch streams or social media presence and being an influencer, all that stuff. Like, get used to that stuff, because every single player is going to start doing it.
Yeah, they have no choice. Well, I mean, they have a choice, but really, I mean, it's the way of the future.
For the longest time, all the big, brash, fun guys that you could market were not the top players.
Yeah,
like even look at Bieksa. Like he was never a star, but he's turned into one on TV, but he was what was he at best, like a shutdown pair guy, and we all loved him.
I will say, he was never the best player on a team or like the best D-man or anything like that, but he's got star quality. And I said the same thing about last year about Brock Besser. He might not be the best right winger in the world, but there's just like something about Brock that, like, he's just got a star quality to his game. And there's certain guys just have that it factor.
It is an interesting point, though. Like, I've always thought in hockey, and there's lots of good ex-player analysts and all that, like Kevin Bieksa, but you don't see a ton of, Hall of Famer, Hart Trophy guys who are doing that job. You look at other sports, like, who are the most famous analysts in the NBA, right? It's Charles Barkley and Shaq. Like, all time, like, Shaq's like a top 10 player, Barkley top 15 player, like, great, all-time greats, right? And you go down the list, right? Like, Kurt Warner is a Hall of Famer who's on the NFL Network. Like, there's more NFL. Yeah, there's more NFL guys in that position than I could even begin to name, right? And it is, I don't know what the reason is, but it does seem like the absolute top stars in the NHL aren't the guys who end up being really good in front of a microphone or in front of a camera. And you have to go down, and Kevin Bieksa was an amazing player, like awesome player. But you have to kind of just go down a little bit to find the guys who are more willing to share their personality for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. I think, it's something to think about a little bit more, because I think the NHL is missing. Like, I do think the NHL is missing that. I was just curious, and I think we've talked about this a little bit. I think PD needs a little bit more of a push.
But, like, that's not the NHL's platform. Like, the NHL's platform is like, hey, we're going to push out the logos, and it's about rivalries. How do we create rivalries? And it's about the teams, and it's about struggle, and it's about all these things that are, painted in hockey lore. It's not necessarily just any one player. It's about the team and doing things together. That's what the NHL tries to promote. And think of how much the NHL cares about parity.
Yeah.
Right. So something like that, it kind of goes. It goes against exactly what you're talking about. Like, hey, promote a star.
Plus, if the NHL was going to try to promote its stars more, like, step one would be protect them on the ice, right? And they're bad. They're real. No, seriously. Like, it'd just be like, don't let them get slashed and cross-checked constantly when it's clear penalties, right? And for whatever reason, they're not willing to even do that. So there you go.
You can't breathe on Derek Carr, and nobody cares about Derek Carr in the NFL.
True. That's true.
I was about to say the NFL does a really good job at selling the stars. I think the NBA gets too much praise for what they do. I think there's a certain echelon of stars in the NBA that do really well, and then there's a second tier that people that are big NBA fans treat as the superstars that I don't get.
Right, but that's just Like
Yeah.
the NBA is a different animal, just because that
Yeah.
game is, it's one person can dominate
Mhm.
a game, right? So like you're right. I almost treat the NBA as a different ecosystem than
Yeah, for
football,
sure.
baseball, NHL, soccer, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's leave it there. We thank you guys for taking the time. I know you guys had long days. Jamie's probably started 7, and Bik, you guys had long days. So really thank you guys. How do we follow you? What do you got coming up tomorrow and coming up this week on Canucks Central?
Well, Bik and I will decide what's coming up tomorrow on Canucks Central in the morning.
5 a.m. No, look, tomorrow's a game day. They're going to be playing the Oilers. So tune into Sportsnet 650, 96.9 HD3 on your radios or on your HD radios, Sportsnet app, Radio Player Canada app, all that sort of stuff. You can find us. But tomorrow, like, look, it's once again like Custer's last stand.
Yeah.
Like that's where they are. You're at the Alamo or whatever it is, and you've got to try to get 2 points. It is a big day. I certainly want to talk about JT Miller. I want to talk about Jake Vertanen tomorrow, and just the new lineups. We like to have a lot of fun, and we certainly encourage everyone else to get involved.
Yeah, and you can hear me on Canucks Central noon to 1 every day on 650. I produce the Scott Rimtool show, which is 9 to noon as well. I'm on the mic there fairly regularly, and I host Canucks Central Saturday, which this week I believe is 4 to 6 on Saturday on Sportsnet 650. The time moves around a little bit depending on when the Canucks are playing or if they're playing on a Saturday. But yeah, check it out.
Cool. And have you determined which podcast you're interviewing?
I have not actually, because I'm a horrible procrastinator. So I'll be sending somebody a DM or a text or something tomorrow and trying to figure it out.
All right, and you can follow us at Jamie Dodd, at Bik 650, Bravo India Kilo 650.
Yeah,
I got it right this time.
Hey, all right. And how do we follow everyone else?
I am BeardyConnect03 on Twitter.
I'm GordHowe09 on Twitter.
Nides, SCHNEIDZ. Tyler is T Noble, TNOBLE. I am KEVULE. Podcast_hockey. Facebook.com, YouTube.com. Subscribe, like, podcast, subscribe there as well. We will be back Sunday at 11. Recapping Flames Sens for sure, and whatever else is going on with the Canucks and what else is going on. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks for joining, and we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.